the first half of the impact of COVID-19 on the U.S. economy presentation. So an overview of the United States. It's a huge country, 327 million people occupying nearly 3.8 million square miles. Demographics are varied by region, but overall is about 65% white, 16% Latinx, 13% African American, 5% Asian or Pacific Islander, or 1% Native American. 3% of Americans have more than one racial background, and 80% of the population lives in urban or suburban developed areas. The political system is a democratic federal republic, which is a collection of states that belong to a central government body that votes on policies that affect the entire body, but have some autonomy for their own local laws and economic practices. It's guided by a constitution which lays out the framework for the three branches of government and their duties, which allows for separation of powers to put in checks and balances to keep all the government branches accountable for their different roles. So gross domestic product is a measurement of all the monetary value of all final goods and services produced in a certain region at a certain time, usually a country within a year. So it's the sum total of all goods and services produced, but it can also be the sum total of these four different categories that make up GDP, which is consumption, investment, government spending, and net export expenditure. So consumer spending is by far the largest chunk of GDP and is just normal expenditures of people, non-durable and durable goods. Investment is more specifically gross private domestic investment, which includes all final purchases of capital goods, construction projects, inventories, and money spent on research and development or arts patronage, because these things keep earning income after they are purchased. Like you can collect rent from a house. Government purchases, pretty simple. It's all the expenditures made by the government to provide public services and properties, and the direct purchase of resources like labor. The government employs a lot of people, they need to pay them. And the smallest part is net exports, which is the difference between gross exports and imports. Because the United States imports a lot more goods that it exports, we only want to count the money and goods that are generated in the United States, so the imports cancel out some of our exports. And in 2018, the US GDP was around 19 trillion. In the first quarter of 2020, real GDP contracted 4.8% at an annual rate, so not 4.8% entirely in the first quarter of 2020. But that's still significant because that was the first GDP decline in 6 years, and we'll get into that more when we talk about the business cycle. So the United States imports a lot of goods, namely cars, crude petroleum, broadcasting equipment, computers, lots of different things, many of which come from China and Asia, as well as Mexico and Canada because of the North American Free Trade Agreement, so goods can flow across North America much freer. And total imports are 2.41 trillion. So COVID-19 affected consumer confidence in imported goods before the virus was fully understood. Before it was understood how it was transmitted, it was like, well, can you get it in the mail? So that was very concerning. And also, workers isolating at home has slowed output of goods that are able to be sold abroad. So the U.S. also exports a lot of things that are our specialty, like refined petroleum, air and spacecraft, cars, crude petroleum, and integrated circuits. Mexico and Canada are our largest trading partners, again because of the NAFTA, but our goods kind of go everywhere. And like I said, the second largest export in the United States is aircraft, and 95% of that is produced in Washington State, which is where COVID-19 first appeared in the United States. So the local aerospace industry has been on indefinite leave since March 25th to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So as you can imagine, this has greatly reduced output of aircraft to sell to the world market. And these are determinants of growth. It's more, in this situation, determinants of how can we recover from this situation. So the sharp decline in consumer spending was driven by a suppressed spending on services and durable goods, with a partial offset from positive spending on non-durable goods. So people are struggling to meet their basic needs during this time. so they can't really put forward any additional income that they have towards consuming an output expansion at the time. So it's a vicious cycle. If you're not able to consume the output, you're not going to reap the benefits of that additional output. So we're obviously entering a recession, which is a period of decline in total output, income, and employment, which lasts 6 months or more and is marked by the widespread contraction of business activity across the economy. In response to the pandemic, a lot of non-essential businesses were closed in March, and by April, nearly 15% of people were unemployed. And to put that into perspective on how crazy of an unemployment rate that is, we like to keep it around 3.5 to 4.5. 4.5% being very high, pretty high unemployment. So this isn't unheard of. It got up to 25% during the Great Depression of the 1930s, but this is definitely the worst unemployment has been in recent memory. Prior to the pandemic, the U.S. economy had been in expansion phase for 11 years, which normally only lasts for 5 years. And as I mentioned earlier, GDP declined for the first time in the first quarter of 2020, for the first time in 6 years. So I would say we're probably, let me turn the pointer here, right around here. Just sort of the zoom, right, almost smack dab in the middle of it. So that's the end of part 1. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for my partner's thrilling conclusion.